Yeah, what's good, Joe? Shaman the Bigger P, and I'm here to talk about the card from last night on Showtime. First fight I want to talk about, of course, was the first fight on the card was the Sakio Bika versus Marco Antonio Parabon fight, and that fight overall was very entertaining. At first, it was just a little bit awkward since it was still in the feeling out rounds, but by the mid rounds, they both were throwing some major shots, wild shots, both of them, and it evolved into a pretty entertaining slugfest. Um, now I can see now I can see people not liking the fight because both fighters were very crude at how they throw. But I was not one of them. I was thoroughly entertained. And the 12th round was a candidate for a round of the year because they both went at it. And yeah, I was happy. I had no problems with the decision. Bika won it on a majority decision, and doing so, he finally, on his fifth try, became a champion. And after the Kazaki, the Bayer, the War, and Butte losses, it was finally good to see him. It was finally someone who I actually was a fan of to actually win the belt. Fortunately, though, I mean it's a paper title because um, Andre Ward is still the referee who was unfairly stripped of the belt by the WBC. So basically, Sakio is a paper champion. Um, but nonetheless, I'm definitely very interested to see where they're going to go with the belt and see where they're going to, what's going to do next. Now, as for Parabon, I've never seen him fight before. They were talking about he threw a lot of punches. He was a very busy fighter. And pretty much that was so. And he also showed a chin. Kasakio did land some shots at him that I thought it would fall, but he took them. He hung in there, and he gave it back as good as he got. And he was spazzing at the end of the fight. He won the fight. His translator was put in overtime. You know, now I don't remember too much of 5 years of Spanish that I took in middle school and high school. But when dudes start talking about puto this and that, I'm like, yeah, I know what that means. Had me feeling like Cameron when I saw that, like, you mad, you mad. um, but yeah, I mean, overall, yeah, that was a great opening fight, and I look forward to seeing. Obviously, I'll see Biko soon, and I look forward to seeing more of Parabon in his future fights. Now, the second fight was Jonathan Banks versus Seth Mitchell. Now, this was a rematch from November, which although people were calling it an upset, I didn't see it that way. It was just simply Banks taking advantage of a very green Seth Mitchell, who had several defensive lapses in a suspect chin and got put out in 2 rounds. People were calling it upset. I call it no, that wasn't upset, not at all. Since Chaz Witherspoon, who we fought, I think, before that, they put him out and won. So yeah, so this was basically a rematch, and it was slow at first, and then it picked up somewhat when Seth got that bogus knockdown after hitting Banks in the back of the head, and he went down. Banks got pissed in the next round and just beat the crap out of him, came close to knocking him out again. And then after that, something strange happened. Like Banks' activity level just went down. It was just you're wondering like why is he going down? Why is activity going down? And he allowed Seth to get back in this fight. Now Seth pretty much couldn't hurt him. He's bigger guy, almost 30 pounds. He couldn't hurt Banks at all. Banks was in no type of trouble. But Banks had just settled down into this weird groove. Either he was just going to counter him, and then if he didn't counter him, he was finally like handle plan B. And I thought this was kind of odd sense because the man is a experienced professional. I was expecting him to at least be more aggressive like he was before, and he got puzzling as the fight continued to go on and on and on. He just allowed Mitchell to outwork him. Now, I would say, now if it was outworking him fairly or outworking him just it was on a level, I would be like, hey, good job, Mitchell. But Mitchell was struggling. Like he had never been past 8 rounds before, and I'll give him credit. He did show good stamina in that aspect. He showed actually great stamina. I wouldn't say good. He showed good. I mean, I expect him to huff and puff, but considering that Banks wasn't really applying any pressure on him, he was just allowed to just slowly outwork him. And I'm thinking to myself, this is terrible. This fight is awful. Um, so yeah, it got to the point where it went the distance, which also I didn't expect it to do. Um, and Mitchell got the decision, and in doing so, kept his career alive. Now, my thoughts on this fight. Mitchell is not the savior of the heavyweight division. That's that's one thing I want to make very clear. Um, it's fun too. Even with the non-activity, Banks still managed to actually almost close his right eye, Seth's right eye. And like I said, Seth was throwing punches, just wasn't hurting him. Seth Mitchell, yes, I know a couple people probably spent a lot of money on him, um, but Seth needs fine tuning. He needs some very serious fine tuning. Um, Anyone, the Klitschko's, whoever they're planning on feeding him to, Klitschko's, Ariola, Hay, um, Stavern, all of them all of them would knock him cold. Um, I'm not high. I mean, Seth seems to be, he's a nice enough guy, but he's just not at the level that they're trying to put him at. And for Banks, now Banks, this should have been a showcase because he was on a big card. He's one of the biggest cards of the year. For him to actually repeat the knockout, I just don't know why he went in the tank like that. Because it seemed like on the round he nearly put him out. He's like, okay, he just dropped, and it's frustrating point because Seth was leaving himself open. He just wasn't hitting him with anything. And this is not like Banks is far from a bum in any aspect. And it was just frustrating just watching him just going. It got to the point where I'm thinking he just he went in the tank on purpose, either because someone told him not to knock Mitchell out or whatever. Because if Mitchell suffered another knockout, his career would be in jeopardy, serious jeopardy. So yeah, I was disappointed in Banks because that would have made a wonderful showcase because good heavyweight fights are they're hard to come by. They really are, and this should have been. I was expecting this to be the most entertaining fight on the card, or at least equal to the main event, and it just flopped. What are you gonna do? Um, so yeah, just highly disappointed with that fight. So then it comes to the main event, Paulie Malignaggi versus Adrian Broner. It was a great fight. I thought it was a wonderful fight. Story was Paulie was outworking him in the beginning, and then Broner, started finding his range, in the middle rounds and into later rounds. But the funny thing is too, because usually Malignaggi has, people he's been busted up before, and I thought Broner would actually have him out there by 10. But the fun thing is, Paulie took Broner's punches extremely. Wasn't really any trouble during the fight, and more shockingly, his face, as many shots as he actually took, he barely had a scratch on his face, which also raises a couple of questions whether or not Broner, really carried enough power to 147, or either that or Paulie has a better chin than even I expected. But yeah, Paulie, because Paulie got tired during the millions, but he was still throwing. The only thing with that fight is Paulie threw more punches, and I think he may have. I don't know if he landed more or whatever. But the only thing is, Broner didn't respect his powers because it was all pillows coming at him. He wasn't dissuaded. He wasn't. No one was able to dissuade him to not throw punches or not to come in because there's nothing back. But Broner also strove to be a little bit too stationary. Because of course he's using the shell defense, but the only thing is though he's a little stiff in using it. He's not like Floyd, who's flexible with it, you know. Anyway, that would probably work for slower fighters, but for someone like Paulie, he should have been a little bit more faster with it because Paulie, was tagging him, was tagging him with shots, but like I said, there was just nothing, no power behind it. So in the later rounds, it got to the point where I know Broner had never been past 10 rounds prior to this, and basically he tried to put him out. I know there was a lot of fouling, like there was a whole bunch of some wild ass punches I never seen throwing back fists. I'm surprised the ref didn't take points away from Broner, and he should have, for multiple back fists in that fight. But yeah, but I think in the last round, I think I overheard a corner that Paulie hurt his hand, which of course everyone knows Paulie has had trouble with his hands. but still he showed the grit of a champion and just went out there and tried to do his best and try to outwork him. Now the scores itself. Now the first two judges score across when it was announced as a split decision. I'm thinking, okay, and I thought it was gonna be a draw. And when I heard split decision, I'm like, okay, maybe it's gonna be a split decision draw. And then they showed they did the scores. I'm like, okay, I can see those scores. The third score, the 117-111 score, was some absolute bullshit. It was bullshit, personified. I'm like, this was not a 117-111 fight, especially not 117-111 for Broner. Not in the least. You know. So Broner won the fight on position, and he's the new WBA welterweight champion of the world. Now, after the fight, you like to see some sort of sportsmanship at the end, and then obviously if there wasn't no sportsmanship because once Adrian got on the mic, it was just this, that, and the third about the side piece, and then Paulie got emotional and started talking about that's his side piece or whatever, leaving with this girl, a whole bunch of other nonsense. And it's like you don't need to do all that. I mean, it was a good fight. Broner got tested. Paulie put up a good fight. There was no need for all that other extra stuff, not at all. For Paulie, I mean, I don't know where he goes now. I mean, he's in the mix. I mean, he's still in the mix. But if he actually did break his hand again, I mean, it's just gonna throw any doubt of whether or not what he's actually gonna do. I mean, for a man who's busted up his hand so many times, it's just so many times you can do this before it starts, starts deteriorating you. Paulie's not getting any younger. But like I said, he surprised me because, like I said, he took Broner shots relative ease and wasn't in at all in any trouble at any given point in the fight. And so my hat's off to him. And as for Broner, now if he's gonna stay at 147, I really suggest that the shell is a nice weapon to use. It's a nice style to have. But if someone with some really fast hands and actually has some power, will trouble that man. Only because Broner's style he's not flexible enough to actually use that shell. I mean, it's good if he's fighting a slower fighter, and then it's like he pot shots them and he throws his combinations at the end of it. So hell, I think even at like toward near the bottom half of the fight, he bended the shell and kept a high guard up. But yeah, if Broner's gonna survive at 147, he probably needs a ton of because he took unnecessary shots. But like I said, Paulie couldn't hurt him. But there are a couple of 147, 140, or 147 fighters that can hurt him, and that's the thing, because he did get hit a lot in this fight. And as usual, he remained pretty classless at the end of the fight, and. I mean, like I said, Broner as a fighter, he's okay. I mean, I have no problems with him. He's an entertaining fighter as an actual person. I'm not a fan of him, not a fan at all. But for him, there's a lot of window to improve. I mean, he trains with Floyd, so maybe Floyd could probably work out his kinks, so to speak. But for now, he's the new welterweight champion of the world. Now, depending on what to see whether or not he's actually going to stay in that division or he leaves the division, he vacates the title. So we'll see. But yeah, those are my views for the Showtime fights. And right now, I'm probably going to now go look at my torrents to grab the Paulie Malignaggi Broner fight, even though it's probably replaying right now, but. I think it's worth having in my archives. So, until next time, peace.